whatever words we're using to describe this. So I'm excited to have her on. So without further ado, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, tell us your background. Tell us what brought you to today.
Yeah, I run a market research company. We do market research and UX research. And it all started long time ago, maybe 15 years ago. I started doing research work back at Booz Allen Hamilton. I was there for 13 years. It was quite a long time at a very large company. And all the while I kept thinking, I want to start my own business. I want to start my own business, but it was really nice to have that steady salary. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same position where it was really nice. And I was like, I want to start my own business. And I found I got to a point where I was like that kid standing at the top of the water slide, like too afraid to jump. And I just had to do it. So I quit Booz Allen. I started my own company. It was this, a side business at first. And then I was like, okay, I think I can do this full time. Let's see, let's give it a go. And yeah, I started it, and it's been really good until COVID. And I think I think everyone's in the same situation. We're at this moment in our lives and in our businesses right now where we're looking at our pipeline and going, wow, we've got to pivot something. Like, we've got to shift something. All the experts are telling me to pivot, but how do I do that? Which way to go? Which way do I go?
Right. Well, that's that's the question, right? Everyone's like, yeah, we get it. Yeah, the world's changed. We're working from home and our kids are here, and, we can't meet clients. So everyone's telling me we have to change, obviously, but what does that mean? What in the world do I actually do? So what are some of the things that your clients or that you are doing, and what are you advising folks to do? How do they figure out what they need to do differently?
Well, there's really only two ways to figure that out. You can do a trial and error, like, oh, I think this discount code is going to work, or I think this is going to bring me more leads, or you can try it and see if it works. But to me, that's kind of like throwing a generous pricing model against the wall and seeing if it sticks. Or you can do your customer research. Like, you can actually call people and talk with them, and call your customers and your past clients and figure out what they're going through so that you have a more clear, confident way to shift.
And that's great. And so this is where, admittedly, my expertise kind of ends. I know that it's important to really have a good understanding of your customers. And I think any business owner will tell you that is the case, right? But so many of them fail to go further than in what I'm going to describe as their best guess, right? Their educated guess. And at best, it's usually anecdotal, experiential information. And it's very rarely, this is what they told me. And we've organized it into real feedback that we're using to inform our sales and marketing. So how do people need to do that?
Yeah. So, I think it starts with the mindset of, okay, I need to shift, because some of us are not even in that place right now. Imagine like you're running a hair salon, and imagine you're like sitting in your house and you look outside, and if you're sitting in your house, so it won't take much imagination, but you're sitting outside and you're looking at two guys on the sidewalk, and they're talking to each other, and, from a safe social distance, and they're both in dire need of a haircut. Right. And you run the salon, and you're like, oh man, times are tough without salons being open. You could look at it like that and say that, or you could look at it and be like, aha, I'm going to be in business forever, because, or at least for the next few months, because I know what they need right now. And so you launch your YouTube tutorials about your DIY haircut, how to do it from home. And you even can start selling DIY haircut kits with the clippers and everything. I had to give my husband a haircut the other day, and like, it is what it is. So, I think it's just shifting that mindset to stop saying, oh, wow, times are tough, and start saying, okay, here's what I can do about it. Like, big big problems come with big problems come big opportunities. So we just have to look at them and say, where are those opportunities? And they're going
Yeah,
to be in different places than they were a month ago.
I completely agree. And I was really, there was this period when everything happened, when there was no one was quite sure what was going on, right? That was kind of the first wave. It was, what in the world is happening? Is this thing really going to shut down my business or change things? And it
And my
did. And then
life.
it was, yeah, really. And it was followed by
My
this.
husband yesterday defended a PhD over Zoom. Like, he became a doctor over Zoom. And I was like,
That
is this happening?
Yeah, that is that's the best one I've heard. Before that, I heard. We saw. Let's see, it was a marriage over Zoom. I think it was the first one in, I think, the county at the time or whatever, that was ever done over Zoom. Oh, I saw an adoption be, I guess, made official over Zoom.
That's pretty
And
crazy.
so
I
so
love
yeah,
that.
it's
That's amazing.
safe to say we're seeing some new things, right? And that brought on the phase two of like, well, what does this actually mean for my business? And then for me, there was this phase where it was like, man, what opportunity this can represent, right? And I almost feel bad for getting excited about it, because I understand there's 30 million people unemployed right now, so I don't want to be insensitive at all. But there's a lot of opportunity for, we talk about industries being ripe for disruption. Well, the whole world is ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
Time to take
Like,
your
this is
pick,
it. This is
right?
the time. Yeah. Totally
Absolutely.
agree. And I think for many businesses, like, if you want to survive, like, not in the future, but even just right now in this short little quarantine period, like, your only hope is to figure out what your customers need right now, and just adapt and pivot quicker than you have in the past. I mean, even over the past couple weeks, we've been seeing really incredible shifts in companies all over the place. I mean, I was talking with a company up in Boston, and they own an art studio in Boston. And this woman, she owns an art studio, and they teach kids art classes and adult art classes. And she's, of course, shifted them online, and she's doing online art classes, which parents across the country are buying now because they want to just entertain their kid on Zoom for an hour so they can work. So what's happening then is she's thinking like, okay, when this is all over, do I need my studio? Do I even need the retail space? Can I turn this into kind of a post-COVID business, all virtual?
Yeah, I mean, I've even talked to, I've talked to gym owners, and I've talked to,
Mm-hmm.
there was a restaurant owner who, made the point that this has actually been great for us, right? Because it's opened up a whole different type of customer. He specifically was saying that there are so many people that just passed us on the way to work that could never really stop by, because they're a sit down restaurant, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it didn't make sense to stop on their commute. But now it's kind of halfway between their work and where they live, and it makes a lot of sense to either order from them, or even when things do go back, to just be this great stop off to order on the way home, pick it up for dinner, and head home. I mean, that's a unique example. It's a strange example, but there's so many of these that I just don't think there's any way that we could have guessed how the market landscape would have shifted in the favor of some of these businesses and some of these pivots before. Thus the nature of the pivot. So after that mindset thing you mentioned, what's the next thing people need to do to really make that change in their business?
Yeah, they've got to do customer research, and they have to do it fast. I mean, that's really the key here. Is you can't be sitting around and doing customer research for the next 4 weeks, where, that might have been a typical, market research project a few months ago, but not anymore. Like, you've got to get this done in a day or two and really figure out what your customers need, so that you have the time to shift your strategy, to shift your marketing, to actually come up with a real strategy going forward, instead of just trying to wing it. So we can certainly get into, if you want to, we can get into the different methods that you can use.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first one, like, let's dive in. The first one would be to call your customers. I mean, it's really simple. Like, call
Wait a
your
minute.
past
Wait a
customers.
minute. I have to pick up the phone and talk to people. I thought this was
Yes,
2020.
I know. So, I mean, notice that I didn't say survey your customers. And we were talking about this before because so many people are like, oh, I'm just going to like stick a survey monkey up and send this out. Like, that's not going to work. So many people like have not really processed what's going on here and in a way that they can verbalize it in a survey. So it's really important that you are having conversations, and that doesn't have to take forever. I mean, I just did this for a conference I was running. I have a passion project I was working on, a women's conference where the sole purpose of this conference was for women business owners to like come together and meet each other in person, which obviously is not happening now. So we just went ahead and we called the people who had bought tickets, and we called people who, like, a few people who had bought tickets and a few people who we knew were planning to buy tickets. And we asked questions like, how can we support you right now? What do you need right now? Is it if we went virtual, would you pay for a virtual conference? And we got, they were really honest on the phone. In a survey, people might have been like, yeah, maybe I'd pay for a virtual conference. But on the phone, they were like, right now, there are all these free virtual conferences and there's all this free learning, and I'm not going to pay for that. So it was a really eye-opening set of phone calls. And guess what? It took one day. It took one day to call 20 people and say, how can we support you right now? If you're not going to pay for a conference, how can we support you? What can we do? And we got some really good answers about what types of training and learning and support they needed in a way that we might be able to shift that business.
Yeah, and in a time, and I've talked about this before, where speed is an asset, right? And that's in normal environments. Well, in an environment where, I mean, what, 9 weeks ago at the April 30th, I mean, we'll say 2 months ago, we were sitting in the best economy in the history of the world. And today, I just saw, I think it may have been Jerome Powell or Steve Mnuchin saying that we're basically in the worst economy ever. That was 2 months. So the ability to very quickly make a decision and then put a plan of action together and then execute on that plan quickly is of paramount, because we could very feasibly be back to best economy ever in, I don't want to say it's going to be a few months, but let's say conservatively, 12 months, we could be heading back towards that. So, but it's going to look so different. You can't just go back to doing things the way that you used to do them. And we were talking about that before as well. So being able to do these things quickly is really, really valuable.
I think it also comes back to the mindset thing we were just talking about. Like, I think this doesn't have to be about slashing prices. This doesn't have to be about like, oh, what discount can I offer? What thing can I give away for free? I mean, there is money in the world out there being spent right now, and you just need to know how to approach the sale with your customer, who's a little bit different right now. Like, their consumer behavior has understandably changed, and they're just a little bit different. And guess what? They're going to be a little bit different even post-COVID. I mean, you had referred to this, I wrote it down as a purging of the old ways. Where did you hear that?
I saw it in a couple of different places. I think it may have just been an article I was reading, but it was intense language, but that made a lot of sense, right? I mean, Zoom, for example, went from 10 million monthly active users at the end of 2019, which is a lot. It's good business, to over 300 million users today.
Yeah.
And so all of those people that have shifted to doing so many things, maybe they did them over the phone or in person, and those are not just going to go away. I think certain things people are saying are here to stay. I just got off the call with a client earlier, and they were saying, man, I heard that we're not going to be allowed to, or not allowed, but they're telling us we should never shake hands again. People are going to shake hands again. Come on.
Yes.
It's human. That's human nature, right? Of just like, get out of here with that stuff. But I may not be that excited to drive even 40 minutes to a meeting in, I don't care what things are like now, because now my client or that prospect, they're like, yeah, it really is kind of easy just to turn on Zoom and we have the conversation and get back to what we were doing right after that. So, I mean, I digress, but yeah, I mean, I do think those are things that are going to stick around.
Yeah. And I do think that you also have to think about like, hey, the truth is that deadly viruses don't last. Like economic downturns don't last. The economic crashes that followed both 9/11 and 2008, they came and they went. So if we look to the past for guidance, we can see that this current downturn will improve. And those who pushed forward during this time, like they use the time to really get to know their customers and deliver value that their customers needed right now in this current state, in this current moment. Like those people, those are the companies that are going to prosper.
It's a
And
great point.
you think about how so many companies have started up in economic downturns, like big names like GE and IBM and GM and Disney and Burger King and Warby Parker and like Microsoft, CNN, like the list goes, even Apple, like the list goes on of all these companies who have started in economic downturns. And even today, there's a ton of companies who are seeing huge boosts in profits. Like think about Amazon and Netflix and Slack. I mean, you mentioned Zoom, Instacart. I'm sure there are a ton of companies like Instacart who are delivering groceries right now, where people are like, wow, that was really easy to get my groceries delivered to me. I probably won't go to the store myself in the future.
Yeah.
So they've probably created customers that are going to stick with them well beyond this pandemic.
Well, on the flip side of that, I mean, I just saw that Ford, I think, posted a $2 billion loss for the last quarter, and they're expecting that to double over the next quarter.
People aren't driving.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those things. I mean, my wife and I had the conversation of like, does it really make sense to be a 2-car family anymore? I mean, my car has sat in the driveway for like 2 months. I've driven it, I think, once just to make sure it just felt like I needed to drive it, right? And just looking at transportation and those types of things where you may, let's say the domino effect of what you just described, where, maybe we continue to get things delivered more often than we did before. And maybe we have a few more Zoom calls than in-person meetings. You may see people go, the average car per household go from 2 to, 1 and 1.75 and 1.5, right? And then down to maybe 1 car per family eventually at some point in the future when things continue to change. But I mean, there's just so many things that this ripple effect is going to change beyond the immediate impact, that are going to stick around. So I know we keep coming back to that. So stop letting me take you off track, Sarah. I like what you're saying. You're talking about talking to your customers and making this happen fast and learning fast.
And you know what? This is the point in these when I do these kind of workshops in front of audiences or these kind of Zoom calls in front of audiences today, where somebody like asks, they raise their hand on Zoom and they ask like, oh, but Sarah, you're a professional researcher. This is your jam. Like, I wouldn't even know what to ask my customers. How do I figure that out? And so how about this for your customers, for your people who are listening to this right now, I'm going to give you a template. I will give you a template. You can put it in your show notes or you decide where you're going to put it for your people, but I will give you a template that has exactly what to say on the phone, where you're saying, how can I support you? What questions you need to be asking right now. So
that's really generous, Sarah. I appreciate that. So guys, if you're listening right now, check the comments or check the description on YouTube. I'll make sure it is in both of those places. If you're listening to the podcast later on, it's going to be in the show notes. Thanks a lot for that, Sarah. That's going to be really helpful to a lot of people.
Okay, so number 2, we talked about 1, call your customers. Number 2, the thing that you should be looking into probably is video diary studies. And so you think about like, what if I told you there was a way right now, we do a lot of in-person ethnography and market research where we go into people's homes and kind of figure out what they're doing, and we're not doing that anymore. But if I told you there was a way to do that, you'd be like, yes, do it. Tell me how. And so here's how. You get a software like D-Scout or something like this, or you can just have people use their phones and take a video of whatever they're doing and show you how they're doing it. We did this for a leading coffee company where we had people take videos Now this was pre-COVID, not about pivoting, but we had people take videos of how they brew coffee over a 4-day period. Just every time you brew coffee, get your selfie video out, take a video of it, right? And we found out something really interesting about the audience that we were doing this with. Turns out that a large percentage of them brews coffee from their bathrooms. I know. We would never have known that if we had not had video diaries like in their space doing that kind of research. And there was a whole slew of people. It was a specific audience, but there was a whole slew of people who were like, coffee is part of my morning routine. I like to get my coffee before I go to the kitchen. Like, get out of bed, get my cup of coffee, get back in bed, do my journaling or my morning routine or read my book, or it's part of my morning routine before the craziness of the day. If I go down to the kitchen, it's all over. Day craziness starts. But in my room, before the hubbub of the day starts, I like my cup of coffee. And so that company then, like, think of all the opportunities they had to market to that very specific segment they didn't know about. Like, they could market, they could change their products, and they have since we did this research, where they have come up with a very compact 1-cup coffee maker for their brand. They have changed their marketing. They also found out that people who did this, they didn't really like talking about it. So they can't market it as coffee for your bathrooms, but they can market it as start your morning off right. Put the coffee right by your bed. It's kind of like the hotel experience. They can market it in that kind of a way.
That's so interesting, because how many of those things that, and they probably didn't even think that was something that, well, number one, you wouldn't ask that on a question, like in a
And they had
questionnaire.
done a tremendous amount of surveys in the past and interviews, and they had done that, and they've done focus groups. I mean, this is a well-established company that knew their customers. This is a leading coffee company, and they had done all that stuff, and they just didn't know this one group. Like, they just didn't have a persona for this because it had never come up. You ask people, where do you brew your coffee? And they're like, I brew it in the kitchen, which is true because they also have a coffee maker in the kitchen. They just don't tell you about the other coffee maker they have.
That's really funny. Yeah. So you mentioned a software for that. You called it D-Scout, and
Yeah, it's
then,
called D-Scout, but there's some others too. You can do it on, so D-Scout's pretty kind of expensive, but you can also use Paco, P-A-C-O. There's a dog on it. It's not as intuitive. D-Scout's a lot nicer, especially on the back end when you're actually analyzing the videos. But I typically use D-Scout for the larger scale studies. Like if I were doing something for like Google News, we used D-Scout when we did a project for Google News where we were looking at hundreds of different people in different personas, and they all had about 8 videos a day. You know, when you get to scales of that amount, you need a good system to categorize them all. But if you're only studying like 10 customers or so, just have them put their videos on a Dropbox file or something. Just say upload them here, or in a Google Drive file or something like that. You can
so the
certainly do that.
process is you'd reach out to a select number of customers and you said, hey, look, we would just like to figure out how to serve you better. Would you be open to this, or do you typically recommend they offer some sort of a incentive?
Yeah, we typically do an incentive, but right now during COVID, if you were to do this, people just want to see you succeed and like make it through this hard time. People are taking research. They have time to take the research. They are taking research and trying to help companies right now. I think out of the goodness of their hearts, like, hey, this company that I've done business with before that I love, they may go out of business. I'm going to help them in any way I can. Yes, I'll do your customer research, and you don't have to pay me $100 for that. So yes, typically pre-COVID, I would certainly offer an incentive, but now we've just been contacting customers and saying, hey, will you talk with us? Will you do this study? You've been a great customer in the past, and we want to know how we can support you right now.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the lesson, folks. First ask, right? Then get your no's. Worst they can say is no. Then you can always make a decision about offering an incentive. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think the video diaries work because we have our phones with us 24/7. And so it's never been easier to like snap a selfie, even if it's not a full scale video. If you're like, hey, can you just snap a selfie when you're brewing coffee, or when you're, the next time you, check the news, or let's say you said you worked with gyms. So let's say you run a fitness app and you're like, hey, next time you work out from home, will you take a screenshot of whatever app you're using during your, I bet you would learn a
Yeah.
ton from that. Just like the
Really good.
screenshots alone and saying, oh yeah, they use this app I hadn't even heard of. I didn't even realize they were a competitor. You know,
Right.
you'll learn a lot about their habits and stuff, whether it's a video study or whether it's selfies that they're collecting, any sort of diary study, you're going to learn a lot.
Gotcha. Okay. That's really good.
Yeah. And then the tactic number 3 is gaining empathy for your customers based on what they're saying on social. Like, figure out what demographic your audience is and just look at the posts by people who are similar. Like, go to Facebook groups and find out what they're talking about, what conversations they're having. Figure out what Facebook groups they're even a part of, because that's going to be helpful in your longer term strategy too, not even just now in COVID, but right now, I bet they're talking about COVID a lot. And I would be interested to know what they're complaining about. You know, do you have a customer who's complaining about being bored, or do you have a customer who's complaining about not having enough time because they're homeschooling their kids and trying to run a business? Or do you have a customer who are small business owners who have a whole nother set of complaints? Like, figure out what they're talking about, what they're struggling with, what jokes they're making, what memes they're sharing. Just try to understand what they're going through, gain empathy for them, and join the conversation, because that's going to help position you in a more empathetic place. Like, I know what they're going through. I'm a company who can help you at this time.
That's good. Yeah. So that's kind of the internet sleuthing step, right? Is go find these people online, go figure out what groups they're part of, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, online communities, figure out what those people are talking about. The job is easier right now, guys, because as another guest that I had on recently mentioned, this is like the first event in our lifetime that is affecting everybody you talk to, and in pretty much the same ways, right? So figure out how your customers
so open to talking right now.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be this
On to
weird
share.
coping mechanism or something where I mean, I'm having conversations with people that, you know, what was the example? I was waiting in line 6 feet behind somebody to pick up our takeout order the other day. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're just having this conversation about, man, how weird is this? You know, this is so strange. I'm wearing a mask. They're wearing a mask. It's like, these things are so uncomfortable. And like, we're talking about this stuff, and it's this little short interaction, but it's like, we walk away from each other saying like, hang in there, man. You know, you guys will bounce back, and I'm talking to the owner of the restaurant or whatever it is. And we're just connecting on these weird levels that you wouldn't have done before. Right. So people you make a good point. People are very open about this. People are talking about it in forums and in groups and in communities that they probably would not have shared the challenges of, say, running a business at home while you've got, you know, a family that's creating some distraction or maybe having some of their own challenges as well. So yeah, there's a lot to be gained from just seeing what people are talking about openly.
Right. And also joining the conversation, because if you can add value to your customers at this time, even if you're not selling them something at this time, if you can add value at this critical time, like in a sensitive way, in a way that resonates, they're going to be your customers for life.
Well said. Yep.
So, and that kind of leads into my kind of number 4 and final point here is new partnerships are forming all over the place. Like, people you have done that you would never have done business with, maybe competitors or other just tangentially related companies that you wouldn't have even thought to do business with in the past. Like, they are open right now to cooperative and collaborative opportunities. And so just opportunities are presenting themselves more than ever before, because people are totally open to, they're not traveling, they're not going anywhere, they're totally open to hopping on a virtual coffee with you and talking about a way that you can both make money. I mean, even before this call, we even talked about like, hey, we should probably set up some sort of arrangement where I can do research for your customers, and then you take it from there when they come to you and they're like, I don't know who my customer is, right? And then you can service them in a better way, in a more valuable way, because you know exactly who the personas are and what the journey map are, and it's been done by a professional company. So it's businesses you never expected to work with are suddenly working with you.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's real economic principle behind this, guys, because the fact of the matter is you have fewer competitors today than you did 8 weeks ago. Just statistically speaking, some of your competitors have dropped out, which is leaving fewer, and I don't even want to say competitors necessarily, direct competitors, but potentially competitors for that same dollar, right? Now you're the fittest that have survived, at least so far, and there's an opportunity for you to then go across the aisle and say, hey, look, you're still providing value to the same customers that I'm providing value to, even though we may not necessarily do the same things, or we may have some overlap. There's ways that you can provide extra value and we can provide extra value if we do things together. I've definitely seen that. There have been several folks that I have started working with in the last month or so that before we just kind of saw ourselves as separate, maybe not competitive, but not exactly was it evident that we could be complementary to our clients. And now it just makes all the sense in the world. And so you're absolutely right. I think that is a big opportunity to look for other businesses that are still doing well, that are making an impact, and see how you guys can work together and share each other's audiences and share each other's customers potentially.
Yeah, I think just people are looking to collaborate right now. So just be open to opportunities that come your way, and even initiate them. I mean, I would say my company, my research company, we do probably 40% of our business over the past year has been from other agencies. So I did a cold outreach to a couple hundred agencies a couple weeks ago. And guess what? I've had a lot of virtual coffee, and people, I mean, it was a really simple message and people are open to meeting with you right now. I mean, we got a much larger response with an email like that than I would have gotten pre-COVID. That would have been ignored by most agencies, I think, pre-COVID. And now it works.
Yeah, well, and if I can even use this podcast as an example of this, right? This was something I had started before, but immediately after everything happened, this just became an awesome forum for me to meet some of those people and discover things that maybe we didn't even realize we could collaborate on because we're having conversations. And so to kind of borrow from that, exactly like you said, just reaching out and saying, hey, maybe there's nothing, right? Maybe we can't. But the worst case scenario is that we've had a chance to maybe share some experiences and give each other some direction and learn from one another. And we can part ways as friends at best and connections, at worst, right? You're probably not going to walk away saying, man, that was a huge waste of time. I wish I had never done that, right? Imagine that especially entrepreneurial folks will be able to pull some value from the time they spent. So that's really good.
Yeah. And so I know I said I had 4 things, but I actually have 5 because you jogged my memory a little bit. So one of the things that you can also look for in terms of opportunities, we're talking about collaborative opportunities, but look at your funnel and figure out where your customers are where your business is going to come from. So in the past, I mean, for my business, my funnel was all in person. So I would go to conferences. I probably spoke at 25 conferences last year. And from every one of those conferences, I get about 10 to 20 people who were in the audience who would follow up with a strategy call, and then I'd close a certain percentage of those. And that's where most of our business came from. So then you have to think of, well, if I'm not going to conferences, if I'm not doing these in-person events, where's that initial state in the funnel coming from? if it's not from conferences, where is it? Is it from Facebook ads? Is it from YouTube ads? Is it from, where are my customers right now? For me, a lot of my customers, because they are not going to conferences, they're learning on YouTube. They're Googling stuff and they're spending time learning on YouTube. So right now I'm working on a YouTube ad strategy that's hopefully going to bring me to the same point of booking X number of sales calls per month. So it's bringing me to the same point. It's just a different way of doing things. So I think it's just the mindset of opportunities and the mindset of, okay, let's think about this, take a step back, stop panicking, and think about this from a strategic place where you're like, okay, let me evaluate where all my past business has come from. And for the word of mouth, for that kind of stuff, let's reach out and figure that out, how to keep that going, even when you're not seeing people in person. Let's, for the stuff that was in person, how do you convert that to something that's virtual?
Yeah, that's something that stacks on what you started with, I think, right? Is once you've learned and you've spoken to and you've gotten some feedback from your customers and you've heard them say, yeah, well, I'm not commuting to work anymore. So maybe that means the radio ad strategy doesn't work as well. Bad example, because hopefully that was a minimal part of your ad strategy at this point, right? But you get the picture, right? Your top of the funnel awareness acquisition is going to likely need to change, right? Because people are behaving differently today than they were pre-COVID or pre-pandemic or pre-apocalypse, right? So learning about how they're doing that and then figuring out how to get them into the funnel differently today.
I mean, when we look at the stats, the number of people listening to podcasts has just shot up so high. And I was at first going, I wonder why that is, because less people are commuting, but it's because they're just popping their headphones in and just, listening when they're around the house, just for a mental break from their families and like from everything else that's going on.
And here's where the opportunity is, guys. Given what she just said, ad costs are still lower. Yes. Because advertisers whose business is reliant on maybe more traditional means or things that were pre-COVID, right, aren't advertising. So here you have a really unique time in history where the number of the reach, to use like technical terms, but the number of eyeballs on a particular medium has gone up and the cost of advertising on it has gone down. That's not supposed to work that way, right?
But it's
supposed
to
be supply and demand.
It's a great time to know your customers and then test different things. So when you're talking about ads, when you're talking about YouTube or Facebook or any Instagram or wherever you're placing your ads, it's a great time to test it right now. You can test it for much less expensive. You won't lose nearly as much when you're just playing around with keywords and stuff like that.
Exactly. And that can be, that's probably a good place to kind of find a stopping point here, guys, is that now is absolutely, so we started by talking about these are the ways that you can figure out how to pivot, but we're going to end by saying now is the best time to pivot and experiment and to gather data and to come out of this thing with some real knowledge about what works and what doesn't, right? This is an opportunity to be better than you were prior to this, again, whatever we're calling this, right? So, Sarah, how can people learn more about what you're doing and how can they follow you?
They can certainly go to bixaresearch.com and you can book a complimentary strategy session if you'd like to. You will be pitched on a sales call. You will be pitched on a package likely. But that's, knowing we've talked about funnels and everything, so you know exactly what you're in for. So you can certainly go to bixaresearch.com for that. You can also reach me on social. I'm mostly on LinkedIn and Instagram. So you can reach out to me at @SarahWeiss_ on Instagram, or on LinkedIn. You can find me there too. Weiss is Weise. I know it's strange. Weise.
So I appreciate the transparency there. I actually was in a meeting one time, and it was just like, I think it was just like a local networking group, and one guy stands up, and not to knock on this guy, he's a great guy, I like him a lot, but he just said, "I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I just want to do this or that or whatever." And I stood up, very like not in a way to poke fun at him. Again, he and I are friends, but I said, I bet you I will try to sell you something, right? And that's why we're all here. But I, kind of laughed it off. I said, but obviously only if it makes sense, if it's something that would add value to you. Otherwise, what the heck would be the point? Because it's never going to go anywhere. So I'm always for people saying, hey, look, I get up in the morning and I go to work so that my business can grow and that ultimately my family can have some more money and more food on the table, right? And that's okay, right? And to say, hey, look, I'm going to provide this value, the value up front. You've spent the last hour providing value to people. You've offered a giveaway that's going to provide value to people. You might try to sell them some if it's right for them, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. I think that's a good thing, folks. That's why we're all here, to learn how to do that better. So, Sarah, I really appreciate this. This has been really helpful. Folks, if you're watching this and you got any feedback for us, please leave it in the comments. I would love to hear it. I'll be sure to share it with Sarah. And if you have any insight that maybe we missed or questions that we didn't get to, please leave them and we'll find a way to do a follow-up. But I want to thank you all for joining me. I want to thank you, Sarah, for joining me. And I'll look forward to seeing you all again